and welcome to the Women's Soccer Show. I'm Allie.
And I'm Sara.
And we have, as ever, got such a jam-packed episode for you. We are going to talk about... There's only one game we can talk about, which was the battle between Man City versus Arsenal, as I dubbed it on X, the Chloe Kelly derby. Just because I now like the word derby. We're also going to talk about the craziness that was the deadline day for transfers, some big business done by some WSL clubs, but not just the WSL. We're seeing some big names move across to Europe, over to Saudi. We've got opinions on that. Some big names being released from London City Lionesses. That's all big stuff. And then we're going to top it off with some Champions League news. The draw is this Friday, that is the 7th of February, so we're going to break down for you how that is going to go down and how the groups can fall. But first, Sara has an apology to make. It's not a serious one, but you know, in a world where most people don't take accountability, Sara is going to take some accountability.
Thank you. I was going to call it a correction and not an apology, but we can call it either one. Thank you to those of you who pointed this out on the last episode. We said Lynn Biondolo, formerly known as Lynn Williams, now known as Lynn Biondolo. We said she was going to North Carolina. She's going to Seattle, and that is totally on me. I was writing it down in our episode notes, and I was just picturing her new headshot with the dark blue jersey, and I just pictured her in the North Carolina dark blue because she played for them for so long, and I didn't even think about it, and I just wrote North Carolina because that's what correlated in my head. So my apologies. Thank you to all of you who reached out and DM'd us about that. First one I saw, I was like, oh my God, I cannot believe I can't believe I did that. But a correction to all of you. Lynn Biondolo is going to Seattle and not North Carolina. All right. And before we get on to the WSL and the rest of everything that Allie just mentioned, we want to give a quick update because in the news, it has been reported that Rubiales, the former head of the RFEF, the Spanish Federation, has finally gone to court. The trial has started. He's been accused of sexual assault against Jenny Hermoso. She testified the other day. Allie, what is the update on all of that?
So the update is if he is convicted, he will face 2.5 years for sexual assault. He is claiming that it is consensual, that he sought consent from her, and that, you know...
Should we say, I forgot to say, this was, of course, pertaining to the World Cup the World Cup kiss that we all know about. I'm assuming everybody knows, but I just feel like the need to interject and say that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So Jenny gave her testimony this week. She mainly talked about how the fact that this ruined one of the best days of her life. You know, she'd worked so hard to get into the World Cup squad and then to win and then to have it blighted, because this is all anybody's been able to talk about is what happened with him in the celebration. She has categorically stated in court, this is her testimony, that she never ever consented to this kiss, nor did he ask permission. So it's not even like something that came across his mind to even ask for. She says, I didn't hear or understand any of it at the time. The next thing was that he put his hands over my ears and kissed me on the mouth. She also told people that she kisses people on the lips only when I decide to, and that she was totally shocked by the fact that her boss was kissing her, and this shouldn't happen in any social or workplace setting. She also went on to say that I felt disrespected and that one of the most important and happiest days of my life was tarnished, and it was a total lack of respect on his part.
I hate that she has to go through this, and I hate that it, as you said before we hit record, is just a he said, she said, and I just hope that I really hope this goes the correct direction. We will keep everybody updated.
No, it's going to go on for a little while, it looks like, because obviously he needs to give his testimony. I think a very important part was she was asked by his defence about the statement that got released by the Federation afterwards in her name, and she plainly says, didn't read it, I skimmed it, I knew it had nothing to do with me because I'd never been approached for comment. They clearly were putting words in my mouth because nobody asked about it, and it wasn't until after it was released that I realised that they'd put it from me rather than a Federation statement, because it said that the two of us were good friends, and it all happened in the excitement but that's not true.
Good for her for all of this. Breaks my heart she has to go through it. We'll keep everybody updated on all of this and the trial and the ongoings. But for now, let's move on to the football of it.
So let's talk the game of the week, and it was the Chloe Kelly derby. We'll get onto that later on the show, why we're calling it that. It was Manchester City versus Arsenal. Arsenal took it 4-3 in the most insane pinball of it all game that was this. It was the most exciting game of this week, and that's why we got to talk about it.
It was absolutely the most exciting. Dare I say the best? Like, I'm not going to say it was like the best defense, but it was certainly the best game, and it was the most fun game to watch. Do you agree with this statement? Manchester City versus Arsenal is the best matchup in the WSL.
Interesting. It's definitely been one that's caused the most drama. It's definitely been the one that had some of the most interesting results. Obviously, it was their loss to Arsenal that essentially lost Manchester City the title last season because they were given a gift by Liverpool and then they squandered it.
Yep.
And yeah, so it's definitely, and I've definitely seen some great games. I've gone to a game where Manchester City beat Arsenal 5-2, and it's always been a very hyper performance. It's probably the most well-matched sides, I will say, because normally with an Arsenal Chelsea or a Man City Chelsea, it's normally very cagey and you'll get like one goal, maybe two if you're lucky. This one, you always know they're going to go all out for it. So therefore, it's probably guaranteed it's going to be a high drama, high scoring game.
I think so. I think at least in recent years, this is the best matchup in the WSL. It's the most fun to watch. Like you said, they just match up in a really good way. And it's also probably partially, which I'm sure we will continue to speak about. We talked about kind of last week, the disparity between teams at the top. These are two teams that have just been of probably the most equal footing for the longest time. Chelsea have always been sitting a little bit above them. United historically have sat, a little bit below them. And in terms of quality, fighting for second place, these two teams have been battling it out for many years now. So it makes sense that these have been the best matchups really in the most recent years. And this one did not disappoint. And I'm not just saying that because Arsenal won 4-3. But I will say I would be in a worse mood if it was flipped or it ended in a draw, because I do think Arsenal deserved to pull that one out. But we'll come on to it. Really quickly, before we get on to the game, you mentioned this was the Chloe Kelly derby, and we'll get into the trades and all of that after this and after Around the World. But Chloe Kelly, in the last day, deadline day, went from City to Arsenal, but we did not see her in the game, which would have been amazing to see her in a Gunners uniform at City like 2 days after that move happened. Why did we not see her, Allie?
Because it is a loan move, it is up to the parent club's discretion if they are allowed to play against them. And as for standard, like before people start going, Man City got scared, it is standard for a parent club to say no. Yeah, and that's what Man City did. They were like, no, she cannot play against us. And that is normal. It happens across the board. So that's why. But she was there and she was in the stands and was videoed celebrating the Arsenal goals, which caused all sorts of drama on social media. Had to get that one in.
I'm so excited to talk about this because I think a lot of people have a lot of opinions on this move, and we're going to get into it after Around the World. But for now, let's talk about this game. As I said, Arsenal took it 4-3. And arguably the most important thing to talk about before we get into the game is the fact that with that 4-3 result, we need to take a look at the table. Manchester City now sit in 4th place. They're 2 points behind the 3rd place Arsenal. They're 5 points behind the 2nd place United. And they are 12 points behind 1st place Chelsea. That's part of what made this game so fun. Like I said, they're usually battling for 2nd. Right now, they're battling for that 3rd Champions League spot. And this game mattered. It was everything. Coming into this game, City were ahead of Arsenal in the table, and this flipped it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. This was, I said it before, it was a crucial game for both teams because Arsenal are going to want to keep on that pressure to get that Champions League spot. Manchester City, if they had any hope of catching Chelsea, to win this. It was unlikely, but they had to get in, and within the first 10 minutes they lost their heads and they were 2-0 down.
And now arguably the only team really with a chance of catching Chelsea is Manchester United, which I don't think anybody would have picked before this season started.
I do have to say, to quote my friend, they are winning in spite of certain people instead of because of certain people with Man United.
Manchester United are winning in spite of?
Yeah.
Listen, you can't argue with a 5-game win streak. They have won 5 straight. And when we say the closest to catching Chelsea, they're still 7 games back. I still, kind of hand Chelsea the trophy right now and say congratulations. But hey, anything can happen. Nevertheless, let's get into this madness of a game, Allie, because right from the jump, Arsenal kick it off with a goal in the first minute, and that sets the tone for the entire match. What do you want to start with?
The watching the game back, that first goal was such a blunder. And bless Arsenal, they capitalized on it, and that's what you got to do. Sometimes you got to just get a smash and grab the first opportunity you can. But it's happened so many times with going back to the goalkeeper and somebody's managed to latch onto it. It's such a dangerous premise.
I don't blame this on Kira Keating, but
No,
okay, what you're getting at is the fact that Manchester City, how many times have we said that about City? No matter if it's working or not, they refuse to change up their game plan. They will always try to build out of the back. And it has led to their ultimate destruction sometimes. Yes. I would love to see a statistic about how many goals get scored against Manchester City because they are playing it out of the back. And I know it's a hard statistic to get to, but I believe we can find it because I really think that their season sometimes is won and lost on some of these goals. And that first goal, like you said, Kira Keating plays it to Alexandri. It's a pure individual mistake from Alexandri. She tries to cut it inside around Caldente. Caldente just picks her pocket. Beautiful finish by Caldente, by the way. I was going to say,
gorgeous goal.
Absolute gorgeous backdoor, slots it in. Nothing Kira Keating can do. It's 1v1 against Mariona Caldente. But that was derived from them refusing to change their game plan and always playing out of the back. And it is infuriating. I don't know how City fans feel, but for me, it's infuriating to watch.
I hate the system. I hate the system from playing out the back anyway. It's not my favorite. But this is the antithesis of why. This is the antithesis of why. You have to play. I understand it's a valid strategy. It really is. But you have to look at your opponent. Arsenal have got the talent and the speed and the pace and everything else to pick your pocket and to punish you for it. You're not going up against a West Ham that might not be able to do that.
Yeah.
At this point, you can see you've got an Arsenal player coming at you. Just if in doubt, boot it out and then deal with the resulting throw in.
I completely agree. I love playing out of the back. I'm a possession whore, really, in soccer. That's how I like to play. That's how I like teams to play when I watch. I love a team that keeps possession, but not at the detriment of yourself, really. I like when teams can adjust their game plan and say, hey, you know what? This isn't the game to play out of the back. So let's not. And City just refused to give it up. We have to talk about the defenses because a 4-3 game, there were 7 goals across the board. One of them was a penalty kick, by the way, which should not have been called.
Was not a penalty. It was outside the box. It was a free kick, maybe, but it was a free kick, but it was not a penalty. And this talks about the reffing standards, but that's another conversation.
Well, you want to go there? We'll go to defense after. Well, maybe we need to talk about this. For me, it's not necessarily about the reffing standards because, like we talked about with the referees last week, it's everybody's human. You have to get some things wrong. We do have to protect our referees because they need more protection. We want more people and more good people to go into refereeing, and nobody wants to right now because it's a thankless job where you get berated on the internet and berated in person and booed in the stadium. And why would anybody want to do that? But what we do need, and this is coming from somebody who hates VAR, is VAR. And I'm sick of saying this every season, Allie, but get these teams in stadiums with VAR capabilities or add VAR capabilities to these stadiums because, oh my goodness, that would have been such an easy overturn.
I was going to say, it would have been picked up easy as a clear and obvious error from the ref. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. So, yeah, we do. I hate VAR too. I somebody who watches the Premier League, it drives me mental. But this would have been the perfect case for it. This would have been the perfect case for it because it was so far out of the box. It wasn't even a judgment call. The ref hadn't kept up with play, and it was just, if I was an Arsenal fan, I'd be fuming.
Yeah. Okay, let's go on to defense because, as I said, this game ended 4-3. Arsenal took it 7 goals across the board. It was a goal fest. I mean, we have to talk about these defenses, Allie. Where do you want to start? Maybe let's look at this table because it's more expected from City. I think when you look at their statistics this season, they have scored 30 goals and they've allowed 18. And those 18, when you look at the other 3 teams in the top of the table, Chelsea have allowed 6 all season, United 5 all season, Arsenal 9 all season, and City 18. That's a huge jump. So City's defense has been lacking all season. I was frankly more surprised by the breakdown in Arsenal's defense.
I mean, yeah, it is more a given in City. I don't want to put it all on Keating. I don't, but I do think they need to swap the goalkeeper out. They seem more sure when they've got their second goalkeeper in. I think she needs to get... It's hard because you want her to have confidence, and the way to get confidence is just to throw her back in. But unfortunately, these errors keep happening, and then that's not going to do anything for her confidence.
Well, I'd argue that they threw her into the fire in the worst time. Like, you want... Kiara Keating's coming off of a long time being out of gameplay, and you don't want to throw her into the fire with, 2 games against United, then Villa, and then Arsenal? That's a big moment to be thrown back into the fire. You want to build her confidence up. Start with some games that don't matter as much or that maybe you have a better matchup against. Start with some bottom of the table teams, but they've thrown her into the fire, and anybody who's played any sport, or I'm sure it pertains to theater or whatever you do in life, like, confidence is a real wave that you ride. And when it's low, you can mess things up that are just kind of routine otherwise. And that's, I think, where Kiara Keating's at. And I really feel for her. I feel her pain because her defense is certainly not helping her out right now.
Her defense is not helping her out. And also, we'll get onto it when we talk about transfers, but the fact that City didn't pick up a centre-back in the transfer window is
my God,
crazy to me. Absolutely crazy to me that they didn't do that. But anyway, let's talk about Arsenal's defence, because you look at it on paper and it is a solid defence. You've got Fox, Williamson, Ruben Moy and Catley. But again, we're seeing it that it seems these teams are more attacking focused than defensively minded.
I will say, I mean, one of those goals, I think, was kind of purely Emily Fox's fault. She lost her mark. Mary Fowler scored being wide open on the back post just because Fox kind of lost her and then was out of position. The other one was a penalty kick. And then the Vivian Miedema goal was beautiful. Vivian Miedema doing, that must have felt so good for Viv, by the way, to score against Arsenal.
Yeah. She did it before. She did it in the return fixture in the beginning of the season.
But it must have felt good at City, like at home in front of her new fans to score against her former team. So, it was 4-3, but honestly think this was more of a breakdown from City. I don't think the 4-3 necessarily tells the better story, a good story of this game. I thought Arsenal were way, way better. It was relatively even on possession. It didn't feel like that. I thought they were a more dangerous team. I do want to say, just to call out a few players, Cooney Cross has come into her own finally. She's been, she was signed after the World Cup to Arsenal, and she was splitting some minutes, getting some starts, but not shining, in my opinion. She wasn't doing badly, but she certainly wasn't shining. She is shining like a bright star right now. And it's so wonderful to watch a defensive center midfielder come into her own like that, because the turns that she was able to make in that midfield, you can tell how much of a difference it makes for Arsenal to have somebody like that in that defensive center mid role. Kim Little's out right now, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and so for her to slot in and take over like that, it's just so huge. And I give Alessia Russo a lot of credit as well. She's playing out on the wing right now, and I thought she did so well tracking back, helping out in the midfield, and it's just really wonderful. I feel like you can see some of these young players on Arsenal come into their own in a way that they just kind of weren't last season.
Yeah, no, 100%. You definitely can see that there's more of a connectivity with the team. I said a lot last season with Arsenal, it felt like they had 11 players on the pitch and it wasn't a team.
Mm-hmm.
I'm definitely seeing the difference here.
All right, any final thoughts on this?
I think my final thought is we talk about defensive. It feels like the goals conceded, I'm ignoring the penalty, the goals conceded by Arsenal were just brilliant moments of attacking behaviour from City. It feels like the goals that City conceded, not to take away from Arsenal, were very rudimentary mistakes that could have been avoided. So like the first goal we talked about, the second goal, somebody should have been marking Ruben Moy better. Like, you know,
that was quite a goal though.
It was quite a goal, but you know, it was basic set piece 101 and they didn't.
Again, Kira Keating left 1v1 with an Arsenal attacker, and it was just Kira Keating flying through the air, Ruben Moy flying through the air, and who's going to get to the ball first.
Yeah, exactly. So I think there is a lot to work on for Manchester City if they want to keep Champions League this season.
How'd you feel Caroline played?
I think she did all right. You know, she did all right. It's going to take a bit of time to see where she's going to fit in the City system. But she's definitely someone they need. Definitely someone they need.
It'll be interesting to see. I think there's more and more Brazilians. There's been a lot of Brazilian internationals in the NWSL for a long time. And the style of play in the NWSL is very different from the style of play in the WSL. And I would argue it suits the way that Brazil plays football a little bit better than the style of the WSL. So I think it'll be really interesting to see how these Brazilian players fit into a WSL and how they're able to assimilate. And I think it'll be really great because what we always say about Brazil is that they've got the firepower, they've got the star power, they've got the creativity, but they need to learn how to work it into a system. If there's one thing I think about when in the WSL, it's systematic football. I think the NWSL is more chaotic, where it's up and down, it's transitional. It's obviously, they're both like systemic football, but I think the WSL is just a little bit more structured in how they play.
Like systems.
Exactly. And so I think it'll be really interesting to watch these Brazilian players slot in there. Could be really good for the Brazilian national team as they come back in the lead up to the World Cup 2027. Let's go around the world. Around the world, around the world.
France and Lyon remain undefeated in the league with their win over Montpellier this weekend. This has opened the gap between them and Paris FC to 7 points. Paris FC are keeping up the chase, however, with their win this weekend.
And to Spain, Barcelona's perfect streak is over. The Catalonian side suffered their first defeat in the league to Levante 2-1. Levante took the lead early on, and it wasn't until extra time that Barcelona got a consolation goal. This has narrowed the gap at the top to 8 points, and second place Real Madrid have a game in hand.
To Italy, and a draw for Juve has narrowed the gap to just 5 points this weekend. Wins for the second and third place teams means the title race is back on.
And finally to Germany, the tightest league in Europe at the moment, picked back up this weekend. Eintracht Frankfurt beat title rivals Bayer Leverkusen 3-2 to remain on top. Bayern Munich and Wolfsburg also won to keep that pressure on.
To the deadline day transfer window, which was as chaotic as it normally is. And we're going to just say this is not just WSL specific. The European transfer window ended, and that brought in some crazy moves as well. There were some big moves over from the NWSL to different leagues, so we're going to touch on all of that. But we have to start with the Chloe Kelly of it all.
Yeah,
because that's the one that made the headlines.
Although I will say, my deadline day kicked off by waking up to the news of Kira Walsh to Chelsea, and that was a pretty wild way to wake up, let me just say that. But we'll start with the Chloe Kelly of it all, like you said. For those of you who did not see, Chloe Kelly posted a long message on Instagram. I believe it was the week before, essentially into her other socials as well. And I'll pull up a little bit of what she said. She said, quote, "With my contract expiring in June, I've accepted my future is not at this club beyond then." She basically goes on to talk about how she's been debating bringing this up into the public domain. She said, quote, "However, to be dictated whom I can and can't join with only 4 months left of the football season is having a huge impact on not only my career, but my mental well-being, unquote. That says it all. So that was posted, I want to say 2 days before the deadline, before deadline day. And then this news drops. She goes to Arsenal. We all thought she was going to go to United so she could stay in Manchester. Allie, thoughts on this move?
Oh, it's a crazy move. Do you know what? It's unfortunately, I don't think we'll ever see her back in a Manchester City shirt.
Definitely not.
Like, I know this is a loan, but it's definitely...
Do people really think that they were going to, though?
Well, some did because it's only a loan, but then a lot of the Manchester City fans don't want her back because they feel like she's burnt every bridge going. I don't see that myself. I personally...
Really?
I mean, she has in a way, but I don't see anything wrong with that. Like, there was a lot of...
I agree with you there.
There was a lot of conversation about how she should have done it, and like, you know, you sign a contract and you get what you're given, and I'm like, careers are short, man. Like,
yeah, I agree.
What you got to do? Like,
I agree.
I think a lot of the bad grace came from the fact that it was rumored but never confirmed she rejected a move to Brighton. Ooh, that was never confirmed, but everybody was like, well, she wants to stay in Manchester, but she'll go to Arsenal. First off, it is much easier to get to North London than it is to Brighton from Manchester.
But why does it matter to people? Like, so they wouldn't have been mad at her if they went to Brighton, but they're mad at her for going to Arsenal just because Brighton's less of a contender?
Correct. And I think that's stupid.
So stupid.
I think it's stupid. I think it's
so dumb. That's honestly, that's so, what is that vibe giving me? That's giving like poor sport, poor loser, you know, come on, let's be good competitors. Let's not be bad losers. Let's be good winners and good losers, everybody.
Yeah. So I think it's a great move for her. I think it's a great move for Arsenal. They need to shore up that wing, and she is a very talented winger. We've seen it time and time again. She loves to score in big games. We saw that in the Euros final. We've seen it in Manchester derbies. You know, she's a great addition to that firepower for Arsenal. I think it's a great move all around, and I think Manchester City are really stupid for not keeping her happy to keep her there.
I agree. And I agree with what you said about, listen, when we talked about her potentially going to United, I said, City fans, I implore you to not be mad at her, because this is her life. Like, this is her career, and you should not blame her for trying to go to a club where she can play football on game day. I can't blame her for that. And for people to expect her to sit on the bench or get mad at her for not wanting to like work her way back into the lineup when it's with a coach who clearly just doesn't see her value. Every player should have the opportunity to play for a coach that sees their value. Every player deserves that. And if you've never had that before, where you have to play for a coach that doesn't see your value, it can do a number on you. It can do a number on your confidence. It can do a number on everything. And so I just think it's a load of boo hockey or whatever that people are upset with her for. I don't blame her at all. Question for you, Allie. Last week, we talked a lot about how Arsenal have been very okay with the mediocre. They've been very okay with accepting Champions League. And this before the Chloe Kelly move was announced, before the Jenna Neiswanger move was announced, which we'll talk about in a second. I was sitting and saying, you've done nothing, Arsenal. You've done nothing all January to try to change this. Does that change things for you?
I mean, it does show a bit more ambition, I have to say, like bringing on someone like Chloe Kelly. So yeah, I think it does. But at the same time, I still think Arsenal are mid. I still think that they will stay mid.
It doesn't show anything to me, to be honest. It shows that Chloe Kelly wanted to leave Manchester City. Like, that's what it shows.
Fair.
I don't feel that Arsenal went out and got Chloe Kelly. There was very little effort put into this January for Arsenal. So I stand by everything I said last week. We mentioned Jenna Neiswanger. Jenna Neiswanger is a left back, played for Gotham FC, spent some time with the U.S. Women's National Team, and now she will be a new addition to the Arsenal lineup. I think that's a good addition. Is it, a firepowered addition? No, but it'll be just more numbers. So I think that's great too. All right, let's go to the big one. Kira Walsh, despite rumors for months that she was going to Arsenal, has officially gone to Chelsea.
So just to give you guys an insight to how we work, we do have like some notes about what we want to talk about. And Sarah did the notes for this one. And Sarah was talking...
I don't even know what I wrote. I'm really excited to hear what I wrote. I really should be looking at them.
Yeah, and so like Sarah's put about how she's like thinks that this really sums up what we talked about last week about Arsenal and Manchester United and Manchester City having no ambition, and that it's all Chelsea and stuff like that. And then I went in and just went, Sarah thinks this. Allie thinks this move's insane.
Ooh. Okay, well, why don't I start off? I'm still not looking at the notes, but I remember what I was thinking. I might be wrong about this timeline, but I believe this move was announced on Thursday, the day after our episode dropped.
Yes.
And I saw a few comments on social media with some people responding to our episode, and I completely agree with this because as I mentioned, we spoke on last week's episode about how Arsenal seem to be very content with just competing for a Champions League spot, and they haven't done anything to really prove to the contrary. And I think that with this move to Chelsea, I mentioned like this was in the conversation around Naomi Girma going to Chelsea and talking about, of course she went to Chelsea because she's not going to go to Arsenal. They're happy contending for a Champions League. And now I feel like this can all be extrapolated and applied to the Kira Walsh situation and then applied further about Manchester City and Manchester United. They all seem to be content competing for that number 2 or number 3 spot. And nobody is going out and getting players like Chelsea is.
I feel like the move is stupid.
Tell me why.
On both parts. Honestly, the only way I can see that this makes sense in the way that I'm breaking it down in my head is Chelsea wanted to take her out of the equation for when they inevitably play Barcelona in the Champions League. Because it makes no sense to me because, yes, for me, she's one of the greatest midfielders out there at the moment. Is she going to get into that Chelsea midfield? Maybe, but that's probably one of their strongest positions at the moment is midfield.
Oh, wow. This is so funny. This is like the Naomi Girma conversation all over again.
It is, but I genuinely think I don't understand why she would go to Chelsea because I genuinely think her game time will be limited because, let's be honest, she has not been doing bits for Barcelona this season. You look at her performances for Barcelona this first half of the season, she's been mid. She would have fit perfectly in Arsenal because she's been mid. She has not really taken up the gauntlet at Barcelona. I genuinely don't understand this move. I genuinely feel like they could have got her on a free in summer. It genuinely feels to me that they have done this move now because A, Walsh wanted to come back to England.
Yeah.
B, they wanted to take her out of contention when they inevitably play Barcelona in Champions League because it makes no sense to me.
Well, it makes sense to me. First and foremost, you're never going to say no to one of the best players in the world.
But you could have got her for free. Why are you buying her now?
But I don't know if you could have. You know, it might, like you said, they want to take her out for Barcelona. Maybe they wanted to take her out of contention. Maybe they were like, if we don't take her right now, maybe Arsenal will take her for less money, but maybe Arsenal will take her. Maybe they just wanted to purely have her now. Perhaps they think that they need to build up their midfield because when Champions League kicks back off, there's going to be a lot of games and a lot of minutes. And there's kind of no amount of players that is too many players when you start to talk about that many minutes on these players' bodies. And yes, the league is like basically already wrapped up, but you can't just put that on a shelf and say it doesn't matter. You still have to compete. Otherwise, it's not going to be wrapped up. So I do think when you're thinking about a Champions League run, you do kind of need the type of depth that Chelsea has now built up to win a Champions League final. You can't really do it without that. So I actually do understand, and I don't think it's crazy club-wise. I also think the defensive center mid position, that number 6 position specifically, is where Chelsea might be lacking the most. Obviously they're not lacking, but I would say every other position has a lot more depth. And I can see her kind of slotting in perfectly. Maybe new skin doesn't get as much time anymore. I mean, I kind of see it. And that's coming from somebody who wanted her to go to Arsenal.
I think this movie is so stupid. I genuinely think it's so stupid.
You think it's stupid for club and for player?
Yeah, I genuinely do, because Kira wants to come back and she wants to come back to England, but, let's be honest. Every English player at the moment is going to be focused on, can I get into that Euro squad? Is Serena going to see me? Can I get into that Euro squad? And I feel like she's not going to get enough minutes. She may get some, like you said, she's going to. Is she going to get enough minutes? Or are we going to see another Chloe Kelly situation where Serena is still picking her, but being like, well, she's got a lot of grace with us, which is going to end up causing a lot of England fans to be pissed off. I have another question, and haven't put this on the notes, so I am going to.
Let's go. We've made it clear that I haven't looked at the notes in a moment, so just tell me anyway.
No, just because it was one of these things that when it got announced, the next day I went and had a couple of drinks with some football friends of mine, and of course we talked about it because this was huge news. And it led to the conversation of specifically Chelsea. And I saw what Ian Wright said about making them have a spending cap and stuff like that. And for me, that felt like sour grapes. And I was like, no, I don't care about that. What I do care about is with spending like how much they've spent on Naomi Gutmann. Like Kira Walsh will not have been cheap. Will have been, I would say easily. I don't think it's been announced how much she was, but I think she's easily going to be $500,000.
Close to it, yeah.
Yeah, close to it. So they've spent at least 1.5 million on 2 players.
Yeah.
Is that detrimental to the women's game as a whole? Because you are then becoming reliant on your men's team even more. Like, but the whole point,
You mean to say that money obviously came in from the men's side?
Of course it did. It had to, because as successful and as Chelsea is in like selling tickets and everything else, they are not making. You look at the accounts every year; they get released as public record. They are not making 1.5 million to spend on 2 players. When you consider the wage bill of all the other players, the training facilities, everything else, they're not making that. They're not covering their costs. It is coming from Todd Bowley, who owns Chelsea FC.
I don't think it's too reliant on the men's side, and I'll explain why. But I do understand the fear behind it.
But is it because I think with Nuco, the whole goal was to make women's football more self-sufficient. Yes, you have the name of the club because that's how you bring in fans, but you are more self-sufficient. And we see what's happening with London City Lionesses, and they have a benefactor such as Michelle Kang who can do things. But when you are spending 1.5 million on 2 players, does that not mean that you are going to be so sufficient on the men's side that you would never become self-sufficient?
I really hope not. I mean, I understand where that's coming from. And the conversation around money in women's sports is a much larger one, because I think we all have the fear that as more money gets injected into women's soccer and women's sport, more dirty money comes in, and it just becomes more and more like men's football. I mean, we're about to talk about how somebody just went to Saudi Arabia. So case in point right there, right? So I understand the fear around it in the smaller sense and in the larger sense. I do also fully, wholeheartedly believe that you have to invest money first, and then later you will see the returns. And I do see this as an investment coming from the men's side that you will then see in returns much later, hopefully not much, but later on the women's side. So I do believe and hope that it's something that it's an investment that is essentially there to help the women's team become more self-sufficient and will in the future. Because people want to see a great team. People will pay. You have to invest money to make money. And that's what I see this as. Now, the larger conversation around big money, I mean, we've talked about how it's dangerous that WSL clubs are tied to the men's side. In my opinion, I think it would be much better if everybody was independent. But, that's a different conversation. All right, let's move it along because we mentioned it. So we got to talk about it. Adriana, the Brazilian international, has moved from the Orlando Pride to a Saudi Arabian side, of which I will not attempt to pronounce the name because I know I will butcher it. But the fact of the matter is she is going to play in Saudi Arabia. And you reminded me, Allie, I'd forgotten. This isn't actually the first big women's player that we've seen do this. I don't even remember who we had this conversation about before, but this is not the first time we've talked about this, unfortunately.
No, it's not. Ashley Plumtree, who played for Leicester in the WSL, went across to Saudi at the beginning of this transfer window. And it was very much shocking at the time because there's no real... They've started a football league over there, but there's no real incentive or league, really.
Yeah.
Over there. And let's be honest, the reason you've gone is for money.
It's for money. That honestly, so Deadline day, I woke up to the Kira Walsh news. And then like 30 seconds later, I read this about Adriana going to Saudi Arabia. And I was like, frankly, this blows my mind more than the Kira Walsh news. I personally can't understand why any woman would want to go live there and play there with the laws. And I had a friend text me like, I can't believe any queer woman would want to go live there and play there. And I'm just like, I can't believe any woman, period, the end. Anybody who's not a straight white man, why are you going there? I don't understand other than the money. And it hurts my heart because it's just so clear that this type of money is already so quickly injected into the women's game. I don't know. I'm having a hard time putting my finger on why that makes me so upset, of why this type of money in the women's game makes me so upset. Are you able to put that into words better than me?
The thing is, like, I always want players to get their dues, and like I've said it before, like, get that money, honey. Like, if you can, like, careers are short. Like, I said that about Chloe Kelly.
Yeah.
But there is something about sports washing, and this is a long conversation for another thing. But
we've talked about sports washing,
and we've
on the
talked
pod.
it before in regards to Manchester City and Newcastle. But and this is what this is. This is the Saudi government's sports washing money, and it's not like she's gone to. I mean, human rights around the world at the moment aren't great, unless you're in like Sweden.
I mean, also let's be totally frank. They're not great in the United States either. So
no.
Who am I to sit here and be like, why would you go to Saudi? It's like, why would you go to the United States? Also, is a question at this point.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Let's just be real about it, right?
It's true, and like you said, you're going to see, I think, a big influx of players going north to Canada, over to Europe, and stuff like that. But it's just something just doesn't sit right with me because of the human rights violations over there, and you can't say you're going to further your footballing career. We said this about when Ronaldo went over there for the men's team. We said that when Jordan Henderson went over there. And not only did he ruin his reputation, he ruined his career because he's not really played properly since, because it did not go well for him.
Because it's not a great quality league.
It's not a great quality league, and that's the problem. So yeah, so it didn't sit right for me. I'm like, there is one thing to like ask Orlando Pride for more money because you've won the league, you won both the Shield and the league with them. It's another to go to. Yeah, no, it just doesn't sit right. It doesn't sit right.
Yeah, it's a tipping point. I think it's the same in men's football. While people got mad at men's footballers for going to Saudi Arabia, it's like you said, we support footballers going and getting paid, and especially women's footballers who just simply don't get paid enough for what they do. We support them going and getting paid, but when something like this happens, it feels like the money outweighed the almost like morality of it, and that's a hard thing to swallow, I think. All right, let's move it along and let's go quickly through it. Speaking of Europe, Crystal Dunn is moving from Gotham FC to PSG. The U.S. Women's National Team International was at Portland, came to Gotham for this one season. Can't say it went all that great for her, and now she's moving over to PSG. Allie, what do you make of this move?
It's a great move for her husband. And that's what I'm going to say on that.
My goodness.
I think it's a terrible move. I think it's a terrible move for all involved apart from her husband.
Okay. I don't know how to move on from that. I think it'll be good for her. I think it'll be good for her football, to be totally honest. I think it's good for her to get out of the NWSL right now for a big variety of reasons. But I think we can be frank about her playing career and say that I do think that her most dominant days are behind her. So I'll be interested to see how she fits in at PSG. All right, move it along. This was announced on the same day as deadline day. Allie, I think we announced it like a week or two ago. So I don't know if we broke news we weren't supposed to break. I don't know. I thought it was official a long time ago. But in case you didn't know, the worst kept secret in the world, the NWSL is expanding. What? And they are getting a team in Denver, Colorado. And if you're thinking to yourself, didn't we already talk about this?
This is brand new information.
This is brand new information. Listen, if we're the ones that accidentally spoiled it before we were supposed to, whoops, and please don't report us.
Let's go to the Women's Championship over here in England, and more controversy coming out of the London City Lionesses in the fact that Rusha Littlejohn was mutually, and I use that in air quotes, let go from the London City Lionesses. She has unfortunately picked up some injuries and hadn't played as much. There was rumours that it was to make room for a Arsenal youngster to go on loan, which did happen. The Arsenal youngster did end up at London City.
Can we get a name?
Yes, so it's Freya Godfrey. That was the rumour. I don't know if the two are linked. But a lot of her teammates, especially her Irish national teammates, talked about how unfair it was and that she deserved better, including Grace Maloney, who is goalkeeper for the London City Lionesses, except for no more, because 2 days later, Grace Maloney was also announced that they had mutually agreed to part ways. Something going on in London City.
So yeah, what's going down, Allie?
It does seem that they are getting rid of a lot of players that helped when they first got up in the championship, and they are building. So we're seeing them bring in, like, they had a Japanese international has come through. Obviously, at the beginning of this season, we saw, Jakobsen come over, Aslani come over. So they've made some big moves, and they seem to be clearing players that aren't quite WSL standard. Not to be rude, but that's...
So do you agree with the club and not the players? Because the players, from what you're saying, seem to be saying, hey, I wasn't treated properly. I've been such a large part of why we're here, and now you're just dropping me, and I don't feel like that's right. First and foremost, is that correct?
Yeah, it does feel like that. And I don't like the words mutually agreed, because it's clear it's not. Right. It's very clear it's not. Rusha Littlejohn has built very much a cult of personality. A lot of football fans love her because the podcast she does with her sister, she does, the TikToks, and winding up Arsenal fans generally is her shtick.
Yep. But
she hasn't played for them, and she unfortunately hasn't had a sparkling club career regardless. She was at West Ham for half a season, I think, played about 6 minutes. So, it's understandable. Grace Maloney's a bigger shock for me because she has, former Reading #1. She's been around for a long time. She was London City's #1, both in number and position. And so to see that that's changed, so this was a huge, huge controversy, shall we say.
Sounds like it. All right, finally, unfortunately, we're ending on a little bit of bad news. England fans, Lioness fans, cover your ears if you want. It has been announced that Georgia Stanway has suffered an LCL tear in her right knee during training with Bayern Munich and will undergo surgery. She will be out for several months. The Euros are exactly 150 days away when we are recording this right now. That's about 5 months. Likely, Stanway will not be playing in the Euros. Usually these LCL injuries take 5 to 6 months minimum to return after surgery. So I think that, barring something miraculous, we probably won't see Stanway with the Lionesses. And the Lionesses have been pretty thin in that midfield to begin with. So even more work to do now for England. And finally, we're going to talk Champions League really quickly, because while the quarterfinals themselves for the Champions League don't actually begin play until March, the draw to see what the matchups will be is this Friday. Oh, I love a good draw, Allie. So let the chaos commence. So, Allie, talk us through how the draw works, what teams are left. Talk us through it all.
So the big thing that people need to now know is group winners have to be drawn against runners-up. So there's going to be 2 pots, one with the 4 group winners, one with the 4 runners-up, and they have to be drawn. You will not get 2 group winners, you will not get 2 runners-up. And the biggest, and this is the huge one, is there is no country protection, which means you can see teams from the same country playing against each other, which means, for example, Manchester City were the runners-up in Group D. They could face Chelsea, Arsenal, or Lyon in their quarter-final matchup. Also, keen to note, it'll be over 2 legs, both the quarterfinals and the semi-finals, and the runners-up will play the first leg at home. They will get home advantage first. So that is key. The ones that are left from Group A, you've got Lyon and Wolfsburg. Group B, Chelsea and Real Madrid. Group C is Arsenal and Bayern Munich. Group D is Barcelona and Manchester City. So you can also not pull somebody from your own group. So we will not see another Manchester City-Barcelona matchup unless they draw each other in the semi-finals.
Question for you. Would you rather have home advantage on the first leg or the second leg?
Second leg, hands down. I see this from in the men's team when West Ham had a run in women in European football. Having the home advantage in the second game was far superior than having it in the first game, because if you're down on aggregate, they will lift you and they will boost you and they will get you there. And it is harder, especially if it's a narrow on aggregate, to go to someone else's home ground. Can you imagine, like, so you've pulled, it's Barcelona versus Wolfsburg, and then you're at Camp Nou for the second leg.
Yeah. That's
pretty
rough.
hard.
You got to go in there with like a 4-0 aggregate just to feel kind of safe. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So 100%, I don't think it's home advantage to get it first.
All right. The final is being played in Lisbon, everybody, on May 24th. So if that sounds like a good vacation to you, go ahead and book that now, because I'm thinking about it.
But to the games that are coming up, the quarterfinals will be over the 18th to the 19th of March, second leg 26th to the 27th. The semi-finals are in April, 19th to the 20th, second leg 26th, 27th. And as Sarah said, the final is the 24th of May, which will be held in Lisbon.
All right. And that's it for us this week at the Women's Soccer Show. A reminder to head over to Patreon. We are going to be posting our NWSL off-season movements chat this week. That's going to be an in-depth conversation covering, frankly, just as many NWSL off-season moves as we possibly can. I don't think it's humanly possible to cover all of them in one segment, but we're doing our best. So that is going to drop this week. And as always, Allie has plenty of great content going up on a weekly basis. So head on over there and tune in. And that's it for us this week. I've been Sarah.
And I've been Allie.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
This podcast was edited by Monkey Hill Media. Visit monkeyhillmedia.com for more information.